right. So we have Vince, we have Nick, and we have Michael who are going to kind of walk through, and they're going to be on our customer panel here for today. And I'm actually going to stop presenting for now. There we go. So you guys are front and center for this day. So I want to take an opportunity first and have them introduce themselves. And then after that, we're going to kind of get into some of the questions that we want to start going through. So again, remember, comments in the chat, reactions, those types of things. So gentlemen, thank you again for hopping on today. We appreciate it. So the first thing is just very basic, easy name, what company, what's your title, and can you tell us a little bit about your company and what you do, what industry you're in, and those types of things? And I'm going to start off. Hey, Nick, could you start us off today?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I am Nick Gephardt. I am with the Kroger Company. We are an American retail organization. We have roughly 2,700 stores. We employ over 400,000 associates. My primary focus at Kroger is Microsoft Teams. So whether that's MTRs, Microsoft Teams Voice, partnering with our other infrastructure or KTD teams, we all work together to bring the Microsoft stack and Microsoft Teams Voice to our associates.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Vince, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Vince Capacci. I work for a company called Hendrickson. We are a global manufacturer of heavy-duty commercial suspension systems for trucks and trailers, military applications, buses, you name it. And I've been with the company about 26, 27 years. I've had various roles. Right now, I'm an IT manager, pretty much dealing with global technologies, help evaluate, test, and then implement things like Teams calling. So this is the latest project that I've been working on for the business.
Perfect. Thanks, Vince. Michael.
My name is Michael Patrizio. I'm a solution architect here at NiSource. NiSource is a regional power provider providing gas and electricity to people in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and in that region. My primary role here was brought on to implement Teams Voice within our environment and adding that addition to our collaboration suites.
Perfect. Thanks, guys, for that. So the first thing is I want to do is bring it out to the entire group and kind of talk about, what really motivated your organization to move to Teams Phone as your enterprise voice platform. And because there's a lot of companies there's so many different reasons that are out there, but what motivated you guys as an organization to get down that road? First, Vince, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Vince, why don't you go ahead and start a little bit about your journey, so to speak.
Yeah, of course. So for us, we had gone all in with Microsoft quite a few years ago, and we got to the point where we invested in an E5 SKU for all of our users, but we weren't taking advantage of the telephony portion of it, right? So we were paying for that, right, to have the rights, but we were still paying for existing contracts with all of our providers everywhere else. So in a sense, we were double paying, for the rights to a phone platform. So it became very attractive to us, about a year into having the E5 with everybody, that we wanted to pilot and understand what that journey would look like. And then as contracts were expiring, we kind of had a nice little project timeline laid out. We focused on the US first, and that's the one that's nearing completion now. So it's been a good year-plus journey for us. But it was really about leveraging that portion of the E5 SKU and then making things simple from an IT perspective, making things simple from a user perspective, getting rid of phones on the desks, helping everybody just kind of go to that, one look, if you will, one pane of glass, and adding that call functionality to the Teams client that we were already using, which really derived from COVID, truth be told, because that's about the time that when everybody wasn't able to come into the office, that everybody was working from home. And that's really when we jumped in, and the Teams platform in general became huge for us. So Teams calling really just rounds the whole thing out for us.
Yeah, in addition to it. So perfect. Great. Thanks, Vince. Yep. How about Michael, NiSource? What do you do? What kind of prompted you guys to go down that road?
Very similar story, right? We
Okay.
had E5 licenses in place, and a lot of that same progression that Vince is talking about is where we were. But we're also an organization that has a lot of regulatory requirements. We're an old
Mm-hmm.
organization, 100 years old. And so there's a balance that you have to find within the design to say, okay, this is where Teams fits in, but how does
Yep.
it fit in elsewhere? What other technologies does it need to integrate with? How do we migrate from, say, a traditional PBX in those areas and still have it make sense within the Teams environment? But very similar, we're invested in the E5 licenses. Let's figure out a way to make this work and take advantage of it. So that was really our journey. And we had evaluated maybe close to 20 different platforms to make sure we were
Okay.
going down the right direction. And for us, it came down to partnerships that would make Teams possible. And that's really the direction we ended up going.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Hey, Nick, is it the same as the other guys, or did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
just like Michael and Vince had stated, yeah, a similar situation there. We're already paying for the Microsoft E5 licenses, and we had the Teams phone license sitting there. And there's a few areas where we have some dated infrastructure, and we were looking for a solution that was cost effective and could also, bring up to speed with relative ease. And Teams Voice was one of those, especially, COVID was mentioned.
Mhm.
We had desk phones on almost every single desk throughout the organization. Obviously, we worked from home for a couple of years there. We're starting to head back in that hybrid model. So we're working on enabling all of our users there, stemming from the COVID era, just because we needed a way for users to be able to communicate with vendors, internally, et
Absolutely.
cetera.
Yep. Yep. So let's go on that. And this is a little bit kind of some of the questions that I've been asking, like a little bit off. Talking about COVID, talk about return to work, right? How much of that is factoring into some of your decisions as you're kind of going down this route? Like thinking about, do you give everybody a DID? Where in the past, guys, didn't we give everybody a DID at one time? I mean, I kind of
Absolutely.
felt that was the case, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that
Go
was
ahead,
the
Michael.
first bit, right? There's your, how do you roll this out? Everybody gets a phone. This is what it is. And for us, we ended up having to go and individually interview everyone to find out how
Oh,
PSTN
you
calling
did.
fits
Okay.
into their job function. How does
Yep.
it, do you use it today? You went home. What happened? How did you work? How were you able to work through that? And how does it change the way that you want to work today? So we literally went person to person to find out how PSTN calling would fit within their job application, as opposed to a broad persona, right? Just
Yep.
really
Yep.
finding out how does it work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um,
And Nick and Vince, I don't know, how did you guys approach that? Did you guys go individual? Did you guys go persona based, role based, those types of things as you were looking at?
A bit of a mix for us. So we initially
Okay.
started with our technology teams, and we're slowly expanding throughout our geo campuses and other like divisional type locations. But we basically did kind of like a blanket move. Unless there was a hard requirement for you to maintain your current DID, we ended up providing a new DID for our users to get them up and running and
Okay.
functional. But we're still going site by site. Basically, we have quite a few locations, and there's a
Yep.
lot of things to work through at each site, whether it's call queues or you know auto attendance, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Vince, what did you guys end up doing at
Yeah, our,
Henderson?
our our experience mirrored a lot what Nick just described. It really wasn't a
Okay.
discussion about moving into shared calling or does everybody get a DID. For us, it was about exiting the current telephony contracts and then
Okay.
just moving over to this platform. So
Yep.
yeah, so everybody retained the DID that they have. We didn't bring in new numbers. It was just a simple matter of porting, right? Losing
Yep.
carrier, bring it over to Microsoft.
Yep.
And talking about the personas, I guess just briefly, since you mentioned it up, yeah, we did have to understand that we had different categories of people. 95% or so all lost their phone. I mean, that was the goal, right? We wanted to
Yeah.
eliminate that hardware cost. People had already had headsets anyhow, right? That was just kind of migrating in slowly over time. So really the only areas that we really had to think about keeping phones would be maybe that administrative category, sometimes an executive assistant, kind of white glove approach, front desk receptionist type people, right? It's not always the same person that would be logged into a computer. So having a phone there, what you guys call a common area phone makes perfect sense. And then being a manufacturing facility, we got shop floors. So we had to put emergency 911 phones everywhere, right? Since we we're changing how we went about this. We actually painted posts red and put 911 phone signs with arrows,
Oh.
and it's
Mhm.
kind of what our leadership wanted to do, just to help identify that, since we were essentially moving phones everywhere else on that shop floor.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. That's a great idea. Well, and I think all three of you kind of touched this a little bit about this a little bit, but desk phone versus soft phone. I mean, I think you probably all were like, hey, I think Vince, you said, I want to pull as much hardware off as I possibly
yeah.
can, right? And strip it down to essential. What roles are going to need it? What scenarios are going to need it? In your case, 911, hey, a spot that somebody's going to go and literally be able to make a 911 call without having to have a phone right there at their side all the time, right? Gabe, just talk about, did you guys have any issues when you were trying to pull phones off of people's desks from a end user adoption perspective?
I think you find out a lot about job function, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we get a lot of, that's not how I work, is a lot of phrase that we get to see. And so you need to be able to accommodate that within the platform, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's
yeah.
IT wise, say, yeah, let's get rid of all the phones. And then it turns out, well, I need them. We need these here. And so
Right.
it wasn't necessarily a complete reduction in hardware, but it certainly was significant.
Significant,
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll jump back in. We didn't really get a lot of pushback because we created that kind of warm and fuzzy embrace early on, right? We did a lot of introductory emails that Teams calling is coming. We just really kind of staged it that the phones were going away, but we did it in a way that people wanted to go down this path. And what we found, at least in our business, is people were excited about it. It was just one less thing on their desk, truth be told, you know.
Yep.
But we got a lot of help too from our Microsoft team, right? There's, if I remember what it was called, there's a Teams phone adoption kit, if I got the name of it right.
Yep.
That has a bunch of literature in it, some PDFs. There's a Microsoft OFT or template file that's actually what we use to send out to everybody at first. So it kind of sets the stage, and it's like anything, right? Frequency, reminder, emails, it just becomes assumed everybody's going to get it. So in the end, for us, you send about 6 or 8 of those out leading up to go live. And we personally haven't had any issues. People are glad to see the phone go away, and the whole headset thing is just kind of taken over.
So it sounds like a little bit of change adoption management stuff that you guys were doing, right, Vince?
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
And I think that's important, right? And I know I do that with my customers all the time, but Nick and Mike, have you seen that approach, utilizing that kind of communication, utilizing training or opportunities to people to learn a good way to be able to approach in your scenario too?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's a heavy communication bit, right? To constantly say this is what it's going to be, and you have some language changes, right? Because before we would talk about, I'm going to make a phone call, I'm going to make a conference call, I'm going to get a conference bridge, and now it's I'm going to make a Teams call. So then you want to make sure you're very careful to say, hey, we're adding this type of calling to Teams to open up the world a little bit more. And depending on your audience, how you have to structure that. It's a new way of communicating, but that frequency and being able to use some of the documentation that Microsoft's given us was a great advantage, right? To say, this is what this means for you.
Absolutely.
And people were excited about it. That was,
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, we're kind of lucky on the Kroger side. We have a really strong associate communication team that helps drive these sorts of deliveries through different, streams, different channels, whether it's an email or internet sites. They're posting blogs and documentation out there for us that then gets, referenced back. And we have partnered with a vendor to kind of create more user-friendly end user documentation, whether it's logging into the phone, hot desking, how do you use your basic telephony features on your whether it's a desktop client or an actual phone that's sitting in front of you.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think part of it too is it depends upon my experience with my customers, and you may agree with this, is it depends upon how much your organization has adopted Teams, that adding phone to it is just an incremental change, right? Or an additional little bit of stuff, but they already know how to go into calls, or they already know to be able to do X, Y, and Z piece. Now you're just adding, well, what about voicemail? Or what about if I'm a delegate? Those types of things.
And a lot of our users were actually enabled with PSTN calling through Skype for Business originally. So not a ton of that changed for a good chunk of our IT user base in several geo locations.
Yep.
But it was just a different client, different experience for them, having everything together there.
Good. Cool. So, and I heard this mentioned a couple times, so I want to kind of dive a little bit into this. So I know, Vince, you kind of talked a little bit about, hey, how you use Microsoft to help you with some of the adoption stuff. It sounded like you used a partner. So let's go down the partner a little bit. How did you guys end up utilizing a partner in this scenario? Maybe talk a little bit about how you went through that process to find the right partner for you guys, right? Every company is going to be a little different how they approach that, but some of those things that you guys learned going through that process. If you could give us a little bit of detail as far as how that worked for you. So I don't know, Michael, you want to kind of start?
Yeah, sure. So when we were evaluating, we looked at our own internal skill set and where we wanted to go and the level of expertise that we needed to bring in. And so for us, we looked at direct routing and Microsoft calling plans, but where we landed was Operator Connect. And the idea is that if you're going to be managing SBCs, I want somebody who lives and breathes SBCs all the time. This is what they do. And so for us, we found a partner that not only had that expertise in the Operator Connect world, but they also had an entire UCaaS platform to fill in the gaps in the areas where maybe Teams doesn't reach. So we could achieve that balance of traditional type connections as well as Teams and anywhere we wanted to go. So that really helped us in our process, right? We were looking for that level of expertise that made sense for our structure and then allow us to meet our logistical and deployment objectives there. So that worked out really great for us.
Very cool. How about Nick? What did you guys end up doing?
Yeah, we have a couple of different partners. So we have our own internal telephony team that is very familiar. They've written an actual open source telephony solution that we use today as part of our deployment. So as we kind of progress through the Teams voice aspect, we're working on setting up kind of a hybrid environment that connects Teams to our open source system to kind of provide some of that synchronization there. We've also had a partner for the voice management aspect of it. So DID management, tagging of the DIDs, providing, RBAC and different types of control for users to be able to log in while not being able to have full Teams communication administrator or other engineer type roles within the Microsoft space. We do use direct routing through one of our carriers currently today.
Okay. Perfect. So I think, Michael, you said you guys are utilizing Operator Connect, right?
Correct.
All right, so you guys are utilizing direct routing.
Yep.
Vince, what are you guys using right now?
Yeah, Microsoft calling plans.
So, hey, we got all the track.
Boy, how'd you know that?
Nice. I didn't even plan that. Did not plan that, so that's good. So, okay. So did you guys utilize any partners to be able to help with this, or did you do it yourself?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a hybrid approach. For us, we're a very flat IT organization. So we're really big on wanting to be engaged, that phrase over the shoulder. When we engage a partner, we want to make sure we're bringing expertise back in-house so that we retain that proficiency. So when we did the evaluation, to kind of maybe go back to where, Michael started, for us, we were dealing really just with a US-based contract that we wanted to vacate at the end of its term. So calling plans made sense for us when Microsoft introduced that, right? We are looking at Operator Connect for our international locations. We did the comparison between OC and then, DR. But from our perspective, we wanted to have, one window to look at everything. We didn't like the idea of having to run PowerShell commands with direct routing or having to go to a different vendor's portal just to source numbers and then bring them back in and all that kind of stuff. So we know it's going to be OC when we get to that stage of our project. But then in terms of what we did do here on this, this side of the ocean, we got to the point where we did want a partner, but we had a lot of proficiency in-house already. So for us, it was about a partner we had an established relationship with already through Microsoft for different projects. And it was about bringing in some manpower and some resources to help us cross the finish line.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see that. I have, again, other customers that do the same thing where they're going to do a lot of the stuff internally, but they really want to be able to have just help to get that first initial kick done, right? Absolutely. So excellent. Thank you. Pivot again. Let's talk about challenges. So I heard a little bit about, looking at what you have. I know Vince, you talked about having the 911 there. So that's kind of a challenge you had to get over. Were there any big challenges that you guys had to come up with a solution to really think through that process, how we're going to do it, how we're going to implement it with Teams Phone? What was that? What was that challenge, and how did you guys get around that?
I don't mind starting us off here. So I
All
would
right,
say
go ahead,
honestly,
Nick.
our biggest struggle, and we still have a little bit of it today, is dynamic routing for E911 while utilizing a cloud proxy.
Mhm.
Very difficult to work around. We've solved most of the issues between partnering with our vendors, Microsoft, and working internally. But we're still experiencing a few issues in the Mac space. Windows systems are currently good, which is nice. But as far
Yep.
as the most struggling thing right now would definitely be the E911 aspect of things. And then in addition to that, ripping everything out of our like legacy systems site by site, we have tens of
Mhm.
thousands
Mhm.
of DIDs and devices, analog, devices all over the place, and just talking to our end users at those sites and building out the plan and seeing how we are going to convert auto attendance into a Teams type space. We've moved, some of the easier call queues and things like that over, but some of the more complex ones are definitely a struggle point for us
Yep.
currently.
Okay. Vince, did you
Yeah.
guys have any? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for us the biggest challenge was really about finding hardware replacements for some of the analog equipment that we have in place, right? I mean, moving a user or porting a user or sourcing a new number, that's pretty straightforward, right? There's a port application process, and just managing the Teams admin center itself is fairly straightforward. But
Mhm.
we've got situations where we've got paging systems in our plants, right? And maybe we have an
Yep.
analog telephone adapter connected to it now that's tied to the current provider. So what piece of equipment do we bring in, or can we repurpose the one that's there, right, with a
Mhm.
flash, firmware upgrade type thing. We've also got ETAs that are tied to like gates and intercoms and stuff like that. So yeah, so the biggest challenge for us was, if we have a facility that's making full use of those types of infrastructure, what's our path forward to get over those hurdles and then keep that site successfully moving towards the direction of getting them fully on Teams calling. But go back to the partners, the one partner that we're using has helped us a lot with that, right? So I'm engaged,
Yeah,
right
absolutely.
now with somebody that's getting over the hurdle for two more of the sites that we have remaining. So we simply didn't have the expertise in house to understand that, and we needed some help. And yeah, the partner is coming huge for us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the partner does help with those particular scenarios too, to really, hey, this is our experience and what we've done very easily to be able to have that conversation and go the next step. Absolutely. Michael, did you have anything to add?
I think underlying both what Nick was talking about and Vince was talking about is, and you're going to have this when you try to implement your phone system, it's data management. It's all very, very granular. Every site down to a single phone needs
Mm-hmm.
to have a configuration. Can it access paging? Can't it? And how do you manage that? For us, our challenge was a lot of that information was coming from a lot of different sources. Some of it's in Active
Mm-hmm.
Directory, some of it's in a CRM that only spits out a CSV, some of it's Excel. And so what we end up having to do is build a Power BI front end to it and Power Apps and some flows to be able to share that information with our third party vendors, internal people, support people, and then the site. So if you're thinking about deploying any phone system at scale, more than 50 phones, focus on the data management, get that granularity correct, and everything else starts to flow in line. But if that foundation isn't good, it doesn't matter what you communicate to those great third parties partners because they don't know what to
Agreed.
do and there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
confusion.
it's
So
a
that
great
was a
point.
Yeah, that's
huge
a really good
challenge for
point.
us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've had a couple of customers where that's been the case where they didn't get far enough into it. They started the project, and guess what happened? They had to stop, walk back, do another, surveys or whatever they ended up having to do to be able to get that information that they didn't get the original time that they did it. So I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I think all that pre-work, I think it's very important in a project like this, especially I think all three of you guys are saying you guys had a lot of legacy stuff that you have to account for, right? Where are all those phones, all those connections, elevators, gates, security gates, right? All those types of things you have to think about and how they interact. It's that integration piece. I mean, what about contact center? Is there any integration in contact center that you have to worry about, right? All those pieces. So great points. Absolutely. So
John, real quick, you brought up one. So contact centers, right? So we actually have a partner where we moved our internal support centers over to Teams Voice, and essentially do a long duration call with our vendor. It's like an 8-hour long call, and they pipe those, their calls through our system, so we don't have to pay for any like PSTN charges. It's essentially running internally. It's really, really cool feature. So if you're a company that has a call center, I would highly suggest looking into some of those things because it is very helpful.
That's good. That's a great point and a good way to be able to approach that. Okay. So I did want to kind of talk a little bit about the impact that going down the road of Teams Phone has made to your end users. And I don't know if you guys have done the like studies or anything specific wrapped around it, but what are you getting back from your end users after you've done Teams Phone, after you've employed this or deployed this, and they've been using it a little bit? What kind of things are you hearing? Are you seeing cost benefit analysis positive on those types of things from your end users?
I'll go first. Everybody seems to be stalled.
Yeah, I know. Like, all right.
Yeah. The feedback has been nothing but super positive. I mean, again, people for us, they like the idea of not having that phone on their desk. A lot of them were already, like I said, dealing kind of with headsets anyhow. So it was easy, right? It was a really smooth transition. All we really did was move the dial pad from a piece of plastic to their Teams client,
Yep, absolutely.
So everybody likes that. They like the simplicity. IT likes it from a support perspective, right? One less thing that we have to deal with. And of course, is one of the things that I would tell everybody, because we did the math up front. We understand the savings by going to this. And it's more than paid off. Every single person we've gone back and surveyed since, the sentiment after the fact has been overwhelmingly positive, right?
Oh, good. Okay.
So we know we made the right decision with leadership from a cost perspective, and we know we made the right leadership from an end user perspective from their experience, right? And that was important to us because we wanted the experience to be something that would be embraced. So it's paid off and then some.
That's good.
I'd say we've received overwhelmingly positive feedback too for the associates that we've enabled. I'd say one of the big convenience things for them is the ability to have it on your mobile device. So not only can you be joined in on your PC. Some of us get double, triple booked. You can I know you shouldn't split your time like that, but sometimes you do have to hop into another call, or you don't want to be giving a vendor your cell phone number to reach you in after hours. So giving them your Teams phone number will allow you to be able to either direct it to the voicemail or pick up that call based on who it is, and it kind of provides that like seamless experience for our end users, whether they're at home, traveling into the office, at an event. Kind of puts all of their communication all in a single hub.
Yep.
I would agree with both of those sentiments there, right? That's been the great benefit. How that was really easy to do, and now it works everywhere. I don't necessarily need to use my cell phone anymore because I have Teams. And then the other bits is how easy deploying applications are. Somebody needed to set up a small call queue, and it was just done. And they said, "That's it? There's no training. There's no software to install. There's nothing else. And no, that's it. We're done." And so that was really a tremendous thing to hear that, like, oh, it's not a big deal. We now have this functionality that we've been trying to get and get sorted out. And it happens just like that. So that's been anecdotally like a great benefit of having the platform.
Oh,
if I can jump on that, I will say, because this is something I had shared with our Microsoft team, coming from the provider that we've got now, using the admin center, the team's admin center to manage the things Michael said, like call queues and auto attendance, the interface is so much easier than what we've historically been used to. And the ease and the ability to create these call queues and auto attendance and set up the emergency policies and all the network topology, if you've got to get into, to those kinds of things too. It's apples to oranges. We're so happy from an IT perspective that we've gone down this path because yes, we can whip up a queue in less than a minute if we have to, right? And then we can make a department manager, say an owner of that queue, and as their staff shifts, because they've got that inside of their own Teams client, right? And I know I could get into the weeds here. We probably don't want to, but they now have the ability to manage the membership of that and not have to wait on IT necessarily as employees rotate within the group. So yeah, administratively, clerically, love it to death.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. There's a lot of things that are not only helping you, but also helping your customers, your internal customers be able to do what they need to do without always having an inundated IT person. And whatever you can do to be able to help that out, God, that's great for you guys. So we are getting close to the end here. So I do want to throw at least one of those. Hey, what is a lesson learned that you had from this? And then add on that, is there some advice you would give people as they're going down this road, going into Teams Phone? So it's kind of a two-parter type thing. So Nick, you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Give you a second to think of it.
Yeah, so this had been mentioned before, but and it might have been Michael saying it, or Vince, but it was the data piece. Making sure that your data is good and solidified prior to doing deployments and having to rework things. Coming from a very complicated configuration, moving that over to Teams, there's a lot of different little components, even whether, this user is part of this sort of a queue or they're, forwarding over to another associate, or you have a delegate for an executive and they haven't used it in quite some time, but then, you remove it and then they realize that it's no longer there. So that the whole data collection piece and filling out surveys and getting them to actually provide you actionable data is very big and key for us.
That makes sense. Absolutely. I agree with that. Michael, you want to lessons learned?
That's certainly the big one, right? That's in any organization. That's the big one. For us, as just an aside, and I know this is the Microsoft call, but having Microsoft support us during this was a big surprise. I didn't expect to get that level of support and that regular cadence, and there we were, and it was great because we had conceptual calls. Sometimes I got into the weeds and said, "Why does the phone work this way?" But having that support was a great benefit to our project. So if you have the opportunity, take advantage of it. So that was a nice surprise within our project.
Great.
Vince? Yeah, I would have said the same thing, talking about the data, but I'll just offer a different, topic here. Get regular CSRs, right? Customer service records from your losing carriers. That was one of the things that we got burned a couple of times because when you do your port submissions, right, and you're trying to, move numbers from a losing carrier to Microsoft, if you don't have accurate records of who those losing carriers are with the proper underlying carrier and the service addresses and things, that could stall your porting, right? If you're in a situation where you're porting versus new numbers. So that was the one thing early on, we're like, and then sometimes we might have a site and then that existing, contract we have, they might actually say we had 100 numbers. They might have sold that to 3 different underlying carriers. So then we learned we had to do 3 different port submissions, but you don't know that. Right. So my advice there would be do some mock port submissions up front. Right. You can go that far in the process without having to get too deep or much less be close to submitting it. And then all of a sudden, when it's doing the number verification, you learn that these 30 numbers are with carrier A, these 30 numbers are with carrier B, and so on and so on. So something a little different than what the guys, just offered.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's always going to be those hidden things that happen.
Yeah.
That all the time. It was like, I've had that happen way too many times, Vince, but I've also had customers where they really didn't know what they had at a particular site because it's one of those, sometimes you just, you just purchase a company that has different locations. You don't get really good documentation. You don't get in there. You have to get it up and running. And then now what? Right. So absolutely. Well, great. Well, I want to say thank you guys. This was amazing. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy days to be able to talk to us about your team's voice deployments. Thank you again. It looked like there was a lot of great comments and questions out there too. So as a reminder, guys, to throw those into our team so you can ask the group. Please give our panel a round of applause. I would appreciate that. I think they would appreciate that too. Thank you for attending, and I will take you guys off, and then I'll bring Jonathan back on. So again, thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.